A bizarre concept, or is it? Is that possible? Can such a statement find a place in accepted theories, or it is in an evident contradiction with everything that we, that is, physicists, know about nature and its laws? Putting aside for the moment the issue of whether existence in a pure state of consciousness is possible, is traveling in time possible, even if only in theory? Is sending and receiving information from the future or sending information into the past allowed by our present theories of relativity and quantum mechanics? If information can be sent, does this also imply that physical matter can be sent via some sort of transdimensional remolecularization? And if so, what are the laws? What are the restrictions? What are the means? Well, frankly speaking, we do not know, but we may have a clue. Kurt Gödel, after he became famous for his work on foundations of mathematics, went on to study the Einstein general theory of relativity and made an important contribution to physics. He discovered a class of otherwise reasonable cosmological solutions of Einstein equations, except for one point: they contained causal loops. At first these causal loops were dismissed by relativists as being too crazy. The arguments against these model universes even became rather personal, commenting upon the state of mind of the inventor, a not terribly unusual phenomenon in the heated debates within so-called ivory towers of academia. A causal loop means the same thing as time loop. It can be described as going into the future and ending up where you started at the original time and place. It is called causal because, in Einstein's theory of relativity, time is a relative concept and different observers can experience time differently, so the term causal is used to avoid using the term time. Forward. But, little by little, it was realized that causal, time, loops can appear in other solutions of Einstein equations as well. Usually they correspond to some kind of rotation of the universe. Causal loops make time travel not only possible, but probable. But then, causal loops lead to unacceptable logical paradoxes, and physics does not like such paradoxes at all. They are a serious problem. But, the subject of communicating with the past or receiving information from the future is being discussed in physics even in terms of the flat, not curved at all space-time of Lorentz and Minkowski. Hypothetical faster-than-light particles, tachyons, can serve as the communication means. They make an anti-telephone, a telephone into the past, possible. But do tachyons exist? Or can they exist? Well, that is still a question that has not been answered definitively for some, and the truth is that paradoxes must never be ignored. They always indicate that some important lesson is to be learned, that some essential improvement or change is necessary. The same holds true for the paradoxes involved in the idea of receiving information from the future. We cannot simply go back into Saturday and tell ourselves the winning lottery numbers of Sunday. If this were possible, then it should also be possible for some future self to tell a future self not to tell. Thus we have a paradox. We, in the future, have intervened into the past, making our communication from the future impossible. A paradox. If we communicated, we have not communicated, and if we do not communicate, then we have communicated. Impossible in a linear, non-branching universe. Is there a possible escape from the paradox, an escape that leaves a door open, even if only a little, for our anti-telephone? Indeed, there is, and not just one, but several ways out. First of all, the evident paradox disappears if we admit the possibility that the communication channels are inherently noisy. That is a normal situation when we deal with quantum phenomena. So, if the communication into the past is a quantum effect, we are saved from evident paradoxes. Quantum theory can be useful. Sending a signal into the past, we are never 100% sure if the message will be delivered without distortion, and conversely, receiving info from the future, we are never 100% sure if this comes from an authentic broadcast or is a spontaneous and random creation of the receiving end. If this is the case, and if certain quantitative information, that is, high strangeness, 9. Theoretic relations between receiving and transmitting ends are secured to hold, then there are no more paradoxes even with reasonably efficient information channels. In other words, there can be broadcasts from the future to the past, but there will be few receivers, and of those few, even fewer that are properly tuned, and even those that are properly tuned may be subject to static. Even if there is no static, those receivers that can receive pure information will experience the static of non-belief and distortion after the fact from society. There is also another aspect of such an information transfer, which is that the probabilities involved are connected with a choice event, with the choosing of one among many possible futures. It may happen that branching of the universe corresponds to each such event. Branching of the universe into an infinite tree of decisions has been discussed within quantum measurement theory. It even has the name of many worlds interpretation of quantum theory. Two of the well-known physicists who consider the many worlds interpretation more than just an exercise in theorizing are John Archibald Wheeler and David Deutsch. The many worlds interpretation has has one serious weakness: it has no built-in algorithm for providing the timing of the branchings. Thus it is a certain framework rather than a complete theory. There is, however, a theory that fills in this gap in the many worlds interpretation, and this theory I know quite well, and in fact I know it better than most others for the simple reason that I developed it in collaboration with Philippe Blanchard, University of Bielefeld, in 1988 as an integral part of the Quantum Future project. It is called Event-Enhanced Quantum Theory, EEQT for short notation. A complete list of references and much more info on this subject can be found on my Quantum Future project page 1 on the World Wide Web. The fact that our generally accepted theories of the present do not prevent us from thinking that time travel is, perhaps, possible, does not necessarily imply that we know how to build the time machine. On the other hand, it is perhaps possible that the time machine already exists and is in use, even if we do not understand the principle of its work, because it goes much too far beyond our present theoretical and conceptual framework. It is also possible that some of the machines 1. http://quantumfuture.net/quantum_future/ we think are serving a totally different purpose do, in fact, act as time machines. Many things are possible. Now, back to superluminal communication, channeling, in general and the Cassiopeans in particular. The fact that sending information into the past is possible does not necessarily imply that any information that pretends to be sent from the future is such indeed. But, if we generally accept that extraterrestrial life is possible, and we use all of our knowledge and resources to search for life beyond our Earth, then we also need to include the understanding that receiving information from the future is equally possible. With this perspective, science should search for any traces of such information. What kind of information channels are to be monitored in search of such broadcasts? What kind of antenna arrays do we need? How must we direct them into a particular, future time, say, into the year 3000, a 30,000, a 300,001? My answer is, nothing like that is necessary. All that we need we already have, namely our minds, and indeed, assuming that the knowledge and technology of the future is, or can be, much more advanced than ours, then it is only natural that any broadcast from the future will be addressed directly into the mind. Even today there are techniques of acting directly on our minds. They are not always used for our benefit, nevertheless they do exist. But if communications from the future are possible, why don't we receive these broadcasts on a daily basis? If our minds can serve as receivers, then why aren't we all aware of the transmissions? I think that the answer has to do with multiple realities and branching universes, and perhaps any civilization which would receive messages from the future on a daily basis has ceased to exist because communication through time is a very dangerous game. You produce paradoxes, and these paradoxes remove the paradoxical universes from the repository of possible universes. If you create a universe with paradoxes, it destroys itself either completely or partially. Perhaps just intelligence is removed from this universe because it is intelligence that creates paradox. Perhaps we are very fortunate that even if we can receive some of these messages from the future, we still continue to exist. Suppose our civilization were to advance to the point where everyone can communicate with themselves in the past. They have a computer with a special program and peripheral device that does this. It becomes the latest fad. Everyone is communicating with themselves in the past too. High strangeness. 11. Warn of dangers or upcoming calamities or bad choices, to give lottery numbers or winning horses. But, what is seen as a good event, a benefit, for one, could be seen to be a bad choice, a calamity, to someone else. So, the next step would be that hackers would begin to break into the systems and send false communications into the past to deliberately create bad choices and calamities for some in order to produce benefits for themselves or others. Then, the first individual would see that false information has been sent and would go into their system and go back even earlier to warn themselves that false information was going to be sent back by an imposter, and how to tell that it was false. Then the hacker would see this, and go back in time to an even earlier moment and give false information that someone was going to send false information that was really true. That false information that was really false was going to be sent, thereby confusing the issue. This process could go on endlessly with constant and repeated communications into the past, one contradicting the other, one signal cancelling out the other, with the result that it would be exactly the same as if there were no communication into the past.